Welcome to Energise Coaching. The purpose of this video is to describe the RPE scale. Now, RPE stands for Rate of Perceived Exertion, which is a fancy way of saying, how hard am I working? And this is a question you should be asking yourself regularly whilst performing cardio. Now, inevitably, if you're going to do cardio that lasts for a lengthy duration, you would probably do that on a lower RPE. So, for example, I'm walking here on a flat level, and I'm walking at a very slow speed, your average walking speed. So my rate of perceived exertion here would be low, and I'd probably say I'm around a 1 or a 2 here. Not really out of breath. I'm able to hold a conversation. I'm not perspiring. And I could do this for hours. You know, this isn't really challenging me. Now, this would be great if you are trying to get your step count up on a rainy day. But we wouldn't really class this as cardio because it's not challenging our cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory systems. Okay, so this would be a 1 or a 2. Now, let's say I was going to stay on this piece of equipment and try and elevate my rate of perceived exertion to a 3 or a 4. So I could make it go a little bit quicker. So I'm going to move that up so that my stride pattern's increased. Okay, and I could move it up onto a slight incline. So now I've gone from a flat level to a 3-degree incline. Okay, now it will take me a few seconds, but what you'll find now is that my rate of perceived exertion will increase. And before long, I'll be at a 3 or a 4 on that scale. Now, the scale runs from 0 to 10. Some people do 0 to 100, but for me, I like to simplify things, so I go 0 to 10. And I would say my heart rate now is 105. So it's come up a little bit from when I was walking on the flat. And I am working a bit harder now. I've still not broke sweat. I'm still able to talk quite clearly. So I'd say I'm comfortably around a 3 or a 4 on that scale. Okay, now what I'm going to do is utilize another couple of bits of equipment as we start moving up that scale. Okay, so we've moved over from the incline walk, where we moved our rate of perceived exertion up from 0 to 1 to 3 to 4. Okay, now here we are on the Concept 2 rower, and I'm aiming to work at about a 5 or a 6. Now, when it comes to heart rate, you tend to find that the fitter you get, the harder it is to bring your heart rate up to a training zone. So therefore, it's not easy to recommend people a certain heart rate for training. And that's why we always resort to the rate of perceived exertion scale. Because it's very easy to identify how hard you're working on a scale of 0 to 10. Now, I'm probably at about a 4 or a 5 here now. Maybe even a 5 to 6. And I know that because I'm having to stop in my sentences and take a breath of air. My heart rate's higher. I'm now starting to break sweat. Things are just becoming a little bit more difficult. Okay? And hopefully you can see from the incline walk to the rower that I am putting more effort in now. And again, when we look at exertion, it's all about what effort am I putting in. Okay, so we're at a 5 or a 6 here on the rower. Okay, moving on from the Concept 2 rower, where I was at a rate of perceived exertion for around a 5 or a 6. I've now come to the Nordic Track, which is an elliptical trainer. And now I'm really starting to pick up the output. Now again, you can see I'm panting a little bit more here. Putting the work rate in, and I'd say on that scale of exertion now, I'm up at around a 7 or an 8. I'm definitely sweating, and I'm having to take more breaks in my sentences, so I apologize for the audio. And I reckon I could keep this up now, bearing in mind I've done cardio this morning, and I've already worked through those sequence of exercises. I could probably keep this up for a little bit less duration than I could when I was on the rower. Now again, it would be very, very easy for me just to take the easy option and slow things down. but then my RPE would come down and progress would be minimal. So you've got to be honest with yourself when you're doing cardio. Am I going to get out of it what I'm putting into it? And if you're not putting much into it, you're not going to get much out. And as one of my favorite sayings, how you do anything is how you do everything. So, like I say, I'm working at about a 7 or an 8 here. I'd struggle to hold a conversation. I'm sweating. And I'm definitely about an 80% now from a point of exertion. Okay, moving on to the final part of the RPE scale. We're now looking at max effort, okay? And when you talk about max effort, we're looking at 9 or 10 on that RPE scale. Now, inevitably, when you're hitting those type of numbers, you're only going to be working in short bursts. Or you could be putting max effort in at the end of a race, for example. You know, so if there was a long climb like the Tour de France, at the end of a stage, then you might reach max effort at the end of that long climb. But you certainly wouldn't be at an RPE scale of a 9 or a 10 throughout the entire ride. You know, think of a 400 meter lying on the floor at the end of a race, gasping for breath. That's where we are at a 9 or a 10, okay? Now, on the static bike here, I'm going to be pushing myself to that 9 or a 10, okay? And hopefully you'll see how much effort that involves. So I'm going to turn up the resistance wheel, and I am just going to bury myself for about 20 seconds. My ability to talk is non-existent. And I'm really trying to empty the tank. Oh. And that, my friends, is a 10.